In a vacuum, extending a rail line to a very popular shopping center outside of a city would be a smart thing to do, but we don't live in a vacuum. We live in Philadelphia. For those who don't know what I'm talking about the King of Prussia extension to the Norristown high-speed line. Now, for those who aren't in the know, I just said a bunch of words and they probably don't mean anything to you, so let's have a brief overview of what I'm talking about. The Norristown high-speed line, other known as the R100 on the SEPTA map, runs from 69th Street Terminal all the way to Norristown. It's a weird transit mode that's a leftover from being an interurban from the Philadelphia and Western Railroad. Anyway, the King of Prussia extension is an extension off of the Norristown high-speed line that goes 4 miles from the main line all the way over to the King of Prussia Mall. This project has so many problems with it that I made an entire video about it here. That video also goes into depth on the history behind the Norristown high-speed line too. Anyway, the big news today is that this whole project has been cancelled. So to discuss why this thing has gotten killed and this project will not go through, let's talk about why this project got killed or why it got cancelled. So in a perfect world, it totally makes sense to build a transit extension to the mall in King of Prussia. It makes sense that this is a big job center and there's a lot of new housing going up over here, so possibly ridership in the future would be slightly higher. But there are two fundamental problems why this project, even in the first place before the cost overruns, was not a good idea. The first has to do with the Norristown high-speed line itself. The problem with this project is that even if you had an extension off of the Norristown high-speed line, you still, to get to Center City, would have to transfer to another service, either to the Market Frankfurt, which is part of their subway metro system, or our regional rail system, which is our farther commuter rail system. So if you're going to be spending a lot of money on a transit project to this job center / mall, then you want to spend money on a one-seat ride generally. So that's the biggest problem to start off with, is that you need a transfer in the first place, and why are you going to spend $3 billion if you're just going to need a transfer? The other problem is that King of Prussia is designed badly in the first place. You are never ever going to get high ridership out of this area because King of Prussia is such a car-infested hellhole that there's no density around the stations to actually support high ridership. The best you are ever going to get is some bus levels of ridership because that's essentially what you're picking up. You're picking up people on the side of the road, essentially. And I pointed this out in that other video. You're only going to get about 9,000 riders per day, which is worse than 11 bus lines in Philadelphia. So with all of this going against it, why would SEPTA still think that the FTA would fund this? This project has so many issues. I mean, the FTA has thrown out a few L's once in a while. Joking aside, why did SEPTA believe that this project was going to get funded? My short answer to this is I don't know, but the longer answer might be more interesting. So if you've ever driven or just commuted around Philadelphia in general, you've probably run into one highway that kind of really sucks, which is I-76 or the Schuylkill Expressway. And if you're a listener to any news program or KYW, you'd know that the Conshohocken curve and that whole section of that road sucks. There is always traffic no matter what time of day. And if we refer to my old video on the KOP rail, we know that most of the SEPTA board members live in the suburbs, and 2 of those counties where the board members are from use this road. And because most SEPTA board members are selected because it's a resume padding political position and less that they know what transit is, they don't actually take transit, and instead they drive most places. And because they live in these places, and because this road is such a problem, most SEPTA projects in the past have always tried to fix traffic, which is creating some alternative to get around 76, which makes sense because regional rail also runs up that direction near Norristown. Look, I would love a rail connection to Reading, PA, and I hope that we get it at some point, but I'm also not making any of this up. The last thing that SEPTA has tried to make a big project out of before KOP was the Schuylkill Valley Metro plan. This plan was essentially running regional rail all the way to Reading while giving peak frequencies of a train every 15 minutes, which is actually pretty cool. The problem was that this never really went anywhere past its planning phase because they couldn't get funds for it. So SEPTA and the Delaware Valley Planning Commission eventually scaled back a lot of these plans to make it so not everything was electrified and there wasn't as much service. But eventually it was scaled back so much that the plan just had to be dropped. But that kind of left SEPTA in a tough situation because if you saw on that map, there was one specific stop that was very important. So SEPTA's last-ditch attempt was to save some portion of this project, and since there was transit over in that area already near King of Prussia, they were probably like, hey, why don't we just extend one of these lines just a little bit? And yeah, when you're thinking about it that way, that makes a lot of sense. But in retrospect, we know this was probably not the best decision. So why did SEPTA keep pushing this project even when it was over budget and kind of futile against the FTA's recommendation for ridership numbers for this type of funding? Well, I think it was a little bit holding on to the dream that the Schuylkill Valley Metro project or something like it would fix traffic. And I don't think this is a totally unreasonable hypothesis either. And even without knowing all the office politics that happened to get this stuff done, we know that SEPTA's general manager, Leslie Richards, lives in Montgomery County out in that direction. And we know that she was originally a PennDOT secretary and then came to SEPTA. So a good part of her thinking would have been how to solve the traffic along 76, or at least solve a transportation issue along 76. But if one of the board members or Leslie wants to talk to me, then yeah, hit me up. Let me know what I got wrong. I do know that the board members and the heads of SEPTA do not like me, and one of the reasons is because the FTA, even if they seem like a very machine-like government agency with strict rules, that's not true. You can sway people. There are humans that work there. And if there's a lot of advocacy, publicity, and outcry from the public against a project, even if they seem like a giant government agency, they will see that and they will hear that and maybe be a little bit influenced by it. And I think for a while, this King of Prussia project flew under the radar of so many people, mainly because SEPTA wasn't talking about it and because it didn't affect many people in the Philly region, no one really cared about it. But, whoopsie! So you're probably asking now that it's canceled, what do we do?
What happens now?
Now?
Let's go cut and cover a subway. That's right, if you don't already know, the next project SEPTA should be focusing on is the Roosevelt Boulevard extension to the Broad Street line. It not only will have 10 times the ridership, but it's also a one-seat ride directly to Center City. If you want more information on it, I have an entire video on it here. So if you want to advocate for something next, this is what we should build. Also, I have another solution for SEPTA. Hey SEPTA, you have some future projects coming up. Maybe you need a future fall person to blame on it if that goes wrong. You could put me in the general manager position or maybe on the board, and then hey, if something goes wrong, I'm out of there. I'm the problem. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out the links below for not only my sources, but extra advocacy links like checking out the Boulevard Subway Twitter. Thanks again to my Patreons for always keeping these videos coming out on time. And if you want to see extra behind the scenes stuff, check out my Patreon. I have a thing up there for the next video actually already.